Singapore businesses are feeling the strain of the ongoing Middle East conflict. A Singapore-Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry poll shows they're facing rising costs and supply chain disruptions. Most respondents are small and medium enterprises. Of the 114 members who took part in the survey, 70% reported higher fuel or energy costs. Another 44% cited delays in shipments and difficulties securing raw materials. Around 20% said their revenue was significantly impacted. More than 90% are looking to government grants and subsidies to offset rising costs. And for more, joining us now on Zoom, Ang Yuit, who is the president of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Now, Yuit, as we've just heard, nearly half of businesses are reporting supply chain disruptions and also higher costs. So what are companies saying about the day-to-day impact on their operations? How bad is the situation for them?
I think, the severity of the situation actually depends on how close you are to the direct impact of the current war. For the industries like in logistics, manufacturing, construction, that's directly relying on all the raw material that the war is impacting, that's an immediate impact and an immediate effect. Rising costs, you have heard, and in some cases more than double in terms of fuel surcharges because of the cost of a raw diesel. And in these particular instances, these are the first order impact, and then you're dealing with also the second and third and fourth order impact across the line. So that's going to ripple through our economy as this war drags on, and it's going to impact us not just in terms of cost. As you saw the survey, it's also impacting compressed timelines. So in some cases, there are delays in shipment gets longer, and all of that results in a credit squeeze in terms of what the SMEs have in terms of supporting the ongoing business.
Yeah, and speaking of that squeeze, we see about 70% of the respondents say that energy costs have risen sharply, and many of them are absorbing these costs instead of passing them on. But how sustainable is this approach?
Yeah, it's not going to be sustainable in the longer term. I think in many cases, SMEs immediately take the price, and they're not in a position to negotiate. So most of the time, they are price takers. So in this situation, most of them would try to sustain in some ways, cut, optimize, reduce the cost on the other areas. And I think anything between 3 to 6 months, that's something they can do. But beyond that, I think many would have real challenges.
Yeah, and 90% of these respondents, they're SMEs. So why are the smaller businesses more vulnerable when it comes to these global shocks like the Middle East conflict?
Yeah, I think there are a few reasons. I think firstly, most of them, as I shared earlier, they take the price, right? They're price takers and they're not there to set, and they don't have the bargaining power. And when you're a price taker, most of the time, you don't have the ability to absorb shocks, and your margins are actually a lot thinner. Secondly, you actually, in the SME situation, they actually don't have as much credit and cash flow to sustain their operations. So when a shock like that comes in, they are in a lot squeezed position compared to the larger enterprises, and credit limits start drying up for them. The third situation is really the administrative overload. A lot of SMEs are a one-man show, or actually the boss is handling multiple hats, right? And in this situation, they are actually fighting fire, and additional load on fighting this kind of fire on top of their daily operations. And that really leaves them very little time to re-strategize and pivot the business.
Yeah, and to fight this fire, an overwhelming 94% of businesses are saying that grants and subsidies would help them to offset these rising costs. What kind of support do businesses need most urgently right now? And in your opinion, what specific subsidies or types of grants would be most helpful?
I think that the situation is critical in certain segments, and others actually are still starting to feel the shock and the impact of the situation. So I think the grants at this point in time and support need to be tailored towards what matters most. I think in this case, things around energy, fuel surcharges. So I think enhancing and stepping up on some of the existing grant, like energy efficient grant, would help. A business adaptation grant could be tailored to target SMEs that are and businesses that are directly impacted in this case. And also extending credit line through the enterprise financing scheme would really help in this kind of situation.
Yeah, and if we were to look at the longer term here, if the conflict and disruptions continue, what are the long-term risks to business resilience? How long do you think our businesses can sustain all these disruptions without any major government interventions or support?
Well, I think that if you look at the medium-term basis, right, I think not many firms that's directly impacted is going to survive without any support, without any change if this continues to go on. The overall, as a country, I think the economy will become less resilient. It starts to get brittle. And definition of that really is that the amount of innovation that firms will invest in or hiring people will all start to freeze, right? And the firms will all go into survival mode. And in that case, either wind down quietly or start to not take on additional business just to make sure your cash flow survives. And I think the time frame, as I shared earlier, not many will be able to last between 3 to 6 months. That's about it for most SMEs. And without any further support, I think that's the kind of window that we're talking about. And with that, as the economy becomes less resilient, I think that makes all of us in a worse off position as we try to steer through all the other geopolitical risks on top of the Iran war as well.
Yeah, Yuit, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us. That was Ang Yuit, who is the president of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises.